Welcome back to Euro Football Daily with your favourite presenter, and today I've got our top 10 of football's most expensive mistakes. 10. Bayern Rob Barça. Top class midfielders are hard to come by. One's good enough for Barça, even more so. Back in 2011, Pep Guardiola made a huge statement about the future of the team, handing a new contract to the then 20-year-old Thiago Alcantara and slapping a €90 million buyout clause on the Spaniard. The son of Brazilian World Cup winner Mazinho, Thiago had already received a call-up to the national team, but 2 years on, he was no closer to being a starter at the Camp Nou. Crucially, Thiago's contract ensured that if he failed to play in 60% of Barcelona's matches, his release clause would drop to just €18 million, less than the Blaugrana had paid for Alex Song. By this time, Pep Guardiola was at Bayern Munich and contacted his brother Pere, who conveniently happened to be Thiago's agent. A deal was quickly thrashed out and Thiago became a world beater in Bavaria. Barca ended up spending €110 million on midfielders over the next 4 years. 9. 8 is enough. In 2012, Alan Pardew took Newcastle to 5th place in the Premier League, ending up above Liverpool and Chelsea, a side which had just won the Champions League. He was the first Magpies manager to win the Manager of the Year award, and the club rewarded him with a whopping 8-year contract, the longest in the history of the division. The deal was intended to keep Pardew at St James's until 2020 and to prevent bigger clubs trying to poach him. That fear turned out to be unfounded. A year later, Newcastle had fallen all the way down to 16th, 5 points above the relegation zone, but the club couldn't afford to sack the coach, as his current contract would have entitled him to £10 million. They should have paid the money. By 2014, Newcastle were in an unstoppable downhill slide, and though a job offer from Crystal Palace allowed them to get rid of Pards without paying him off, they ended up in the Championship in 2015. It's estimated they missed out on more than £120 million in revenue during their year in the second tier. 8. Defence spending. When you're bankrolled by the limitless wealth of oil-rich plutocracy, it's easy to spunk the money into the transfer window with reckless abandon. But even by their standards, Man City have dropped a disgusting amount on defenders in their attempts to establish a Sky Blue dynasty. Since the arrival of Vincent Kompany, 4 Man City managers have spent £207 million on 10 central defenders as possible partners for the big Belgian. Some were genuine flops like Kolo Touré and Mangala, while others left before finding success elsewhere, like Jerome Boateng and Stefan Savic. Pep Guardiola has now added John Stones for an incredible £47 million, and the Catalan looks set to venture into the defender market again this summer. After all, they've got to get it right sometime, right? 7. Losing streak. Usually bets have one loser, but in 2012, one wager ended up badly for all concerned. Sam Gorman, a 22-year-old West Brom fan, made a £100 bet with a friend that he could run naked across the pitch during an Aston Villa home game against Man City. With a capacity crowd at the 42,000-seat Villa Park, Gorman streaked in front of the Doug Ellis stand, performing a cartwheel before he was caught by security. But though he won £100, the cost was insane. Gorman was fined £145, which would have been bad enough, but he was also handed an 18-month community order and was placed on the sex offenders register list for 2 years for committing indecent exposure. A stupid prank and the promise of cash saw Gorman lumped in with rapists and paedophiles. What an idiot. 6. Ground zero. Darlington had never played in the English top flight back in 2003, but that didn't stop the ambitious efforts of chairman George Reynolds. He decided to move the team, whose highest ever finish was 15th in the second division in 1926, to a new stadium, naming it, modestly, the Reynolds Arena. The ground cost £18 million and could seat 25,000, pretty ambitious in a town of just 100,000 people. Even worse, it was built using high-interest loans, and with the record attendance at the ground a paltry 11,600, there was no prospect of the Quakers earning enough to pay their debts. They went into liquidation within 6 months and went on to be declared bankrupt a further 2 times over the next decade, dropping into non-league football in 2010. They now play in the 6th tier. 5. The Emirates Stadium. In 2004, as Arsenal were romping to an unbeaten Premier League title, the club broke ground on the Emirates Stadium, a 60,000-seat successor to their beloved Highbury. The project cost the Gunners £390 million, and to pay for it, the club took out long-term commercial deals, while the bank asked Arsene Wenger to commit to at least 5 more years as manager. The new ground opened in 2006, but the financial restrictions imposed on Wenger meant he lost star after star and couldn't compete with the big spending of rivals Chelsea, Man United and Man City. To top it off, the Prem's new TV deal came along just as Arsenal finished paying off their debt, giving the league's teams more money. As a result, rivals Tottenham are able to build their own stadium, with no need to spend a decade selling off their best players, and making Wenger's penny pinching virtually pointless. I wonder if you can tell who wrote this. Patrick Van Straten. 4. Paul Pogba. Even worse than Barcelona's blunder with Thiago was United's monumental balls-up with Paul Pogba. In his final years at United, Alex Ferguson became more and more reliant on the old guard, even getting Paul Scholes out of retirement at 38 rather than dipping into the market. But before Scholes made his return to the side, Fergie was still reluctant to give products of United's famed academy a chance. With Darren Fletcher sidelined by illness, youngster Paul Pogba thought he had a shot at starting, only to see the coach pick right-back Raphael in the middle of the park instead. Disgusted, the Frenchman instructed agent Mino Raiola to get him a move and switched to Juventus, where he became a household name. 4 years later, United paid a world record £89 million to bring Pogba back to Old Trafford, but really, he should have never left. 3. Simon Jordan and Crystal Palace. A trainee with Crystal Palace, Simon Jordan's football career never took off, and like all failed academy products, he was desperate for work. Lucky for him, a friend had a business selling mobile phones, so Jordan teamed up with him, and in a decade the pair were able to sell their company for £73 million. At 32, Jordan spent £10 million to buy his childhood club, and appointed himself as chairman, the youngest in the Football League. Palace were on the verge of bankruptcy, but that didn't stop Jordan making the grand claim that they would return to the Premier League within 5 years, and he had zero tolerance for failure, sacking 5 managers in 3 years. Jordan admitted that his love for the club prevented him seeing it in business terms, and by 2008 he needed to sell the club. No buyers were interested though, and as Jordan's bank balance dwindled, Palace were no longer able to pay player wages. The side went into administration in 2010, and Jordan left Selhurst Park for the second time. He had lost nearly everything. 2. The Ukrainian, the Russian and the Portuguese. Shevchenko was an expensive mistake for Chelsea back in 2006. The Ukrainian joined the Blues for £31 million and scored 22 goals in 77 games, hardly the return expected for a club and English record signing. But there was another cost to the transfer. Sheva became a symbol of the discord between Jose Mourinho and owner Roman Abramovich, as the coach insisted he needed a new forward, while the Russian maintained that Mourinho needed to persist with the former Milan man. Enraged, Jose sent Shevchenko to train with the reserves, and eventually manager and club agreed that the special one should leave. In the 10 years since, the Blues have gone through 12 managers, including Mourinho again, spending untold millions in signing bonuses and severance packages. Perhaps if it hadn't been for Shevchenko, Mourinho could have been West London's answer to Alex Ferguson. 1. The 2014 Brazil World Cup. The 2014 World Cup was meant to be a triumph for Brazil, and not just on the field. The government claimed the tournament would bring in huge numbers of tourists and create jobs and investment for years to come. Brazil spent $14 billion on hosting the competition, but it soon became clear that most people wouldn't benefit at all. A new stadium in Manaus ate up $319 million and still demands $250k a month in upkeep. Officials claimed there would be 1 million new jobs, but the rate of job creation actually dropped, and the population suffered as prices rose for the duration of the tournament. Meanwhile, whole cities had to declare public holidays as tourists filled the streets and workers stayed home to watch football, leading manufacturing to fall by 4% across the nation. Brazil's GDP, the measure of how much money a country earns per person, fell too, from $11,750 to $11,200 in 2015. In the end, far from invigorating the Brazilian economy, the World Cup left the people poorer. And that's without even considering that 7-1 battering at the hand of Germany. So those are our top 10 most expensive mistakes. As always, let us know what you thought in the comments below. And if you've enjoyed this, check out Stat Wars with Chris and Pat. Pat probably won, maybe Chris, I don't know. I should be on it soon. Anyway, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe. And that's without even considering that 7-1 battering at the hand of Brazil.
Oh, look, fans of Germany, mate.
Kill me! Kill me! Oh, you And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe. My voice broke.